We have all been there. That rush of intoxicating motivation that comes with a fresh start. A new week, a new month, a new year. We set the monumental goal. We outline the perfect plan, and we begin with the energy of 1,000 suns. For 3 days, maybe a week, we are unstoppable. Then, the inevitable happens. The routine cracks, the momentum stalls, and we find ourselves right back where we started, buried under the heavy weight of self-recrimination and the bitter taste of yet another failure. Why does this cycle repeat itself endlessly? Why can we not maintain the consistency we crave, even when the goal is something we deeply desire? The answer, hidden in plain sight within the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, is that we are approaching the entire process backward. We are demanding massive, immediate transformation when life, like nature itself, only responds to gentle, persistent presence. The secret to unbreakable consistency is not found in intensity. It is found in intention and the deliberate reduction of required effort. We are going to explore 10 fundamental shifts rooted in the spirit of Kaizen that will transform your approach from self-sabotage to sustainable, lifelong momentum. This isn't about working harder. It is about flowing smarter. The first and perhaps most damaging trap we fall into is the zero to hero mindset. We believe that if we are going to start exercising, we must immediately commit to an hour at the gym 6 days a week. If we are going to start writing, we must produce 1,000 words before breakfast. This mindset is deeply appealing because it offers the illusion of instant progress, but it is fundamentally hostile to human nature. Our brains are wired for efficiency, and they perceive massive, sudden demands as threats that require immense energy expenditure. When you ask yourself to go from doing nothing to doing something huge, your inner resistance mechanism activates fully. The subsequent failure is not a moral failing. It is a predictable physiological response to an unsustainable demand. To build consistency, we must make the initial commitment so small, so laughably easy, that the brain does not even register it as a threat. We must dismantle the zero-to-hero fantasy and replace it with the realism of gradual accumulation. This brings us directly to the second principle, the profound power of the 1% increment. Kaizen, at its core, is the philosophy of continuous, small improvement. It doesn't ask for a revolution. It asks only for a slight refinement today that is marginally better than yesterday. If you want to read more, the 1% increment is reading 1 sentence. If you want to meditate, it is sitting still for 60 seconds. The goal here is psychological victory, not measurable output. When you complete that 1 sentence, you have successfully engaged in the habit. You have proved to yourself that you are a person who reads. The momentum generated by a successful tiny action is far more valuable than the burnout generated by an ambitious, failed one. Consistency is a muscle built not by heavy lifting, but by daily engagement, regardless of how light the weight feels. Focus on showing up, not showing off. If you can only manage 1% improvement today, you have successfully moved forward, and that forward motion, compounded over months, will generate results that the zero-to-hero approach could never sustain. Our third step is crucial: identifying the Muda, or waste, in your routine. In the Kaizen framework, Muda refers to any activity or resource consumption that does not add value. We often think of waste only in terms of physical clutter, but the most destructive Muda lives in our time, energy, and decision-making processes. Are you wasting 30 minutes every morning scrolling through feeds that leave you feeling depleted? That is Muda. Are you spending an hour agonizing over the perfect software or notebook before you even start the work? That is Muda. Consistency requires a clear runway, and Muda is the debris that forces us to constantly abort our takeoff. Take a quiet moment to observe your day without judgment. Where does your energy leak? Where do you engage in preparatory activities that never lead to the actual work? By consciously naming and eliminating these pockets of waste, the unnecessary steps, the excessive planning, the indulgent distractions, you free up the mental bandwidth required to maintain your chosen habits effortlessly. Once we have cleared the waste, we can focus on the fourth principle, the sacredness of the first 5 minutes. The biggest barrier to consistency is inertia, the difficulty of starting. Once you are in motion, staying in motion is relatively easy. Therefore, the entire focus of your consistency strategy must be dedicated to winning the first 5 minutes. Make the start frictionless. If you plan to write, your computer should be open to the document, the software loaded, and your distraction blockers activated before you decide to sit down. The moment you decide to work, there should be 0 steps left between you and the action itself. The purpose of the first 5 minutes is not to produce quality work. It is solely to activate the sequence. Tell yourself you only need to commit to 5 minutes. 9 times out of 10, once that 5-minute commitment is fulfilled, the flow state will take over and you will continue naturally. If you stop after 5 minutes, you still win because you maintained consistency. This leads us naturally to the 5th concept, the Siri principle, decluttering your mental workspace. Siri is often translated as sort or structure, and it applies to the environment, but its deepest application is internal. An inconsistent life is often the result of a cluttered mind, overwhelmed by competing priorities, unspoken anxieties, and the constant hum of external demands. If your mental workspace is filled with 5 urgent tasks, 3 looming deadlines, and 2 unresolved conflicts, your energy will be so fragmented that focused consistency becomes impossible. Siri requires you to ruthlessly prioritize, and crucially to externalize what doesn't belong in the immediate work zone. Write down the competing thoughts, schedule the necessary conversations, and defer the non-urgent tasks. When you sit down to engage in your habit, whether it is learning a skill or practicing stillness, your mind should contain only the space for that single action. Consistency demands clarity, and clarity requires a dedicated, decluttered mental space. The 6th principle is the strategic use of the habit-stacking anchor. Consistency thrives when new actions are not treated as independent, isolated events, but as natural extensions of existing, established routines. Trying to carve out a new time slot in an already busy day is exhausting. Instead, anchor your new habit to a habit that is already automatic and unbreakable. The formula is simple. After I will immediately ... For example, after I pour my first cup of coffee, I will immediately write 1 sentence. Or, after I brush my teeth in the evening, I will immediately lay out my workout clothes for the morning. The existing habit becomes the undeniable cue. Your brain, accustomed to the flow of the anchor habit, accepts the new action as an inevitable, minor addition to the sequence. This removes the need for conscious decision-making and transforms the new activity from a struggle of will into a simple matter of flow. Inevitably, even with the best systems, you will encounter a slip-up. You will miss a day, maybe 2. Our immediate destructive reaction is usually self-judgment, which quickly spirals into abandoning the habit entirely. This is why the seventh principle, the art of the intentional pause, is so vital. When you miss a day, do not immediately criticize yourself or try to compensate with a massive, exhausting catch-up session. Instead, pause. Treat the slip-up not as a failure, but as a data point. The intentional pause requires you to sit quietly and ask, what specifically caused the break? Was it a lack of preparation? An unexpected external demand? Or was the goal still slightly too large? The purpose of this reflection is not blame, but understanding. By pausing, reflecting, and immediately forgiving yourself, you prevent the slip from becoming a spiral. You reset the clock gently, ensuring that the break in consistency is measured in hours, not weeks. The true definition of consistency is not perfection. It is the speed of your return to the path. Building on that idea of data gathering, the eighth principle is micro-experimentation, treating failure as data, never as destiny. If you try to establish a reading habit at 7 p.m. and you repeatedly fail, the solution is not to try harder to force it at 7 p.m. The solution is to change the variable. You are not failing. The hypothesis regarding the timing is incorrect. Consistency is an engineering problem, not a character flaw. Perhaps you are too mentally drained at 7 p.m. Switch the habit time to 6 a.m. for a week and observe the results. If that fails, try anchoring it to your lunch break. By approaching your habits as a series of small, low-stakes experiments, you remove the emotional attachment to the outcome. You are merely collecting information about what works optimally for your unique schedule and energy cycles. If the system is failing, change the system. Never assume the fault lies within your lack of willpower. To further safeguard your consistency, we employ the ninth principle, Poka-Yoke, or mistake-proofing your environment. Poka-Yoke is a concept originally used in manufacturing to design processes so that errors are impossible or immediately obvious. We apply this to our daily lives by making the desired action the path of least resistance, and the undesired action the path of greatest resistance. If you want to practice guitar every day, the guitar should be on a stand in the middle of the room, tuned and ready to play. If you want to avoid late-night snacking, the unhealthy food should not be visible or easily accessible. If you want to ensure you go to bed on time, charge your phone not beside your bed, but in another room entirely. Poka-Yoke is about designing your environment to enforce your intentions. It removes the necessity of fighting a battle of willpower every single day because the environment is already rigged for your success. Consistency becomes automatic when the right choice is simply easier than the wrong one. Finally, we arrive at the 10th and most powerful secret to unbreakable consistency: embracing the long view, or the gyroscope effect. When you start practicing Kaizen, the changes often feel imperceptible on a daily basis. Reading one sentence today does not make you a scholar. Sitting still for 60 seconds does not eliminate lifelong anxiety. This lack of immediate dramatic feedback can be demoralizing. However, the true genius of small, persistent steps is that they create invisible, cumulative momentum. Imagine a gyroscope. When it is spinning slowly, a small nudge can knock it over. But once it achieves a certain speed, it becomes incredibly stable, resisting massive external forces. Your consistency is the same. Those tiny, daily 1% increments eventually build a powerful internal momentum that stabilizes your life. Once you have been consistent for 6 months, Missing a single day feels wrong, jarring, and immediately corrected, not because you are forcing yourself, but because the system itself is now self-correcting. You are no longer pushing the habit. The habit is pulling you forward. The consistency becomes unbreakable because it has become part of your identity and your equilibrium. To summarize the journey, we must first accept that massive immediate goals are psychological traps. We must commit to the gentle power of the 1% increment, focusing on showing up, not the output. We must ruthlessly eliminate the mental and physical waste that drains our energy. We must honor the sacredness of the first 5 minutes, making the start ridiculously easy. We must declutter our mental workspace so that our focus is singular and clear. We anchor new habits to old ones, making them inevitable additions to our flow. When we slip, we do not self-destruct. We use the intentional pause to gather data without judgment. We treat our process like a continuous micro-experiment, always tweaking the system if it fails. We mistake-proof our environment using Poka-Yoke, ensuring the right choice is the easiest choice. And finally, we trust the long view, knowing that small, persistent actions will eventually create a powerful, unbreakable, self-sustaining momentum. The gyroscope effect of an intentionally lived life. Unbreakable consistency is not a gift bestowed upon the highly disciplined. It is a system designed by the gently persistent. It is not about reaching a mythical finish line. It is about finding profound satisfaction in the quiet, persistent presence of the process itself. Start small. Start now. And commit to being just 1% better than you were yesterday. That is the Kaizen secret, and it is the only way to build a life that truly flows.